Thank you so much for joining the Falling for Learning podcast. This episode, we are going to be interviewing Dr.
Okay.
Robin Harwick, and she is the founder of a remote school. And we're going to talk about how this could be a good strategy for your child, how you might join her school, and how she fell in love with learning. Hi, thank you so much for joining the Falling for Learning podcast. We have this podcast to help parents and caregivers with having the resources, strategies, and tools needed to make sure that their children are on track for learning and to stay on track for success. Thank you so much, Dr. Robin Harwick, for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. I'm excited for our conversation.
Yes, me too. Let's get into what was it as a child that had you fall in love with learning?
Always loved learning. I was a nerdy kid. My joke is that I always got so many tattoos later in life so that people didn't know what a nerd I was. And my friends always said, we still knew. Um, you know, I had a really natural curiosity and I loved reading. And, I was the kid who always had a book in my hand and, hiding out in my room to finish the book and everything like that. Interesting though, I never knew that I was going to become an educator, even as much as I loved learning. So I think it is just like following my natural curiosity and my natural passions. And then I would say by fluke or by fate, here I am as an educator.
Okay. Do you have educators in your family at all?
I do. My auntie was a principal, so again, surprised that I didn't know I was going to be an educator. And my great aunt was also a teacher. Yeah,
Okay. I tend to see there's some kind of educator uh lineage, no.
seems to be. Yeah,
Even if it's sometimes not formal, right?
right.
But yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. And so your curiosity, tell us about your educational journey.
Yeah. So, I was labeled gifted and talented in school, which we now are finding out more and more that really meant that most of us were probably neurodivergent and we didn't have the language for it back then.
Okay.
So the discourse for the young people today talking about this has been really interesting for me. But I was never challenged in school. So I
Okay.
never learned study skills. I showed up. I got good grades. Nobody paid much attention to me. I graduated, and when I tried college the first time, I didn't persist. I thought that it would work just like high school, and I didn't study and often didn't go to class and went to take the tests and failed.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where you met your first kind of challenge. Before
Yeah,
that, you just were um able to get it, and so you didn't have like a challenge, like you didn't really have to study. Wow. That's
exactly.
so interesting. And
Exactly.
so that is something like as parents we need to think about, right? Um if our kid is just getting things that we may need to find some challenge for them so that later on they could be successful. So that's something that maybe they didn't think about,
Yes.
right? But luckily, you said you tried your first time and wasn't successful at college. Okay. So
Yeah.
it's yeah. So what so you were
Well,
failing. What happened
I was
next?
feeling, but I would like to back up a little bit
Oh,
because what
back
you
it
put
up.
on, that was super, super important. So about 25% of kids that are identified as gifted and talented end up dropping out of high school.
Yeah.
And exactly what you picked up on, what happened for me and for many students that I've worked with since, um, once you figure out, like, I can only get an A, I can't go beyond that, right? And because of classroom sizes and other types of challenges, teachers might not even realize that this student is not being challenged. And
Right.
so we see it in behaviors. Kids start getting in trouble in school. They start, skipping school and all of those kind of things. So for parents, that are listening, it's really important to figure out, is this like is because I can't do it and they need more support, or is it because it is just so easy for them they're
Mm.
not interested, right?
That's something to really, yeah, because like you were saying, Dr. Harwick, is like the teachers might not uh connect with that issue. But as a parent, you need to make sure that you are giving them that challenge, you're helping them to stay motivated. And I think we don't talk about it enough, right? That we do know that as an educator myself, I know that that is a statistic that our gifted and talented students will drop out. Like there's a percentage of them that will. And so, just thinking about loving learning, right? And not just getting the learning for the purpose of getting that A.
Exactly.
And one way it was described to me too was like that growth mindset versus the fixed mindset, right? So once they meet the challenge, sometimes it's like, "What?" And like, "I guess I'm not good at school anymore." Rather than like because they haven't had the challenge, like, "Oh, well, maybe I, need to keep working on this." Like, they don't have that growth mindset. They're just like, "Okay, I'm done being good at school because I failed the test." And it's not that I need to do better or work on it because they haven't had to before. So, thank you so
Exactly.
much for highlighting that.
Yeah. So, going back to my journey, so I dropped out and I went and did other things, and then I decided to go back when I was 25, and I did my undergraduate, and then life kind of went and did life things, and then I went back. I've always had a very research brain, and I was working at a research institute, and they said, "Well, don't you want to get your PhD?" And I was like, "Hmm." I don't know, maybe. I'm from a working class background. My mom was a factory worker, my dad was a mechanic, and
Yeah.
so like, "Don't you want a PhD?" And I was like, "Tell me more." Do I?
Wow.
Yeah, and so, mentors said that, I really should get one, and so I was the only person in my cohort. I was older in life by this time, I had
Right.
2 kids, and they said, "Well, you can take classes during your workday," and, I was like, "Okay, well, this is sounding more and more interesting," and so I finally decided to go, but I was the only one in my cohort in my doctoral program that hadn't, like, wanted a PhD, and I was kind of like, "Huh, this seems like it's working out." And again, it's that love of learning. I'm learning things. I'm, getting to read. I'm having this opportunity to talk with really knowledgeable people about things that I care about, which, were kids that struggled like I did during my transition into adulthood. And I had seen so many people struggle during that early, young adult period that I wanted to get more information so I could support kids in their transition more. And so,
Okay, so that's your study, right? That
yeah,
was your, so what do you get your PhD in? I understand what your study was, but
yeah. So it's secondary special ed in transition.
okay. So, yes, and that's another thing that I guess that people may not know is that gifted and talented students are also part of the special education,
Yeah,
um, under the special education umbrella, right?
exactly.
So, yeah, exceptional needs or like, maybe, disabled, a learning disability or something like
Mhm.
that, they fit under that same umbrella.
Yes.
Okay. And so you were able to go back and talk to kids like yourself.
Yeah, for my dissertation work, it was a little bit unique because I've worked a lot with kids in the child welfare system. So I really looked at the intersection of child welfare and disability.
Mm.
So my dissertation study was on the transition to adulthood for young adults with disabilities. So, again, really looking at understanding what worked well for kiddos that had a lot of circumstances beyond their control.
And then can we go like cuz you're saying some students were gifted. Were you studying gifted students or students with disabilities or range of students?
Just a range of students, yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Um and where did you study?
So at the University of Oregon, I got my master's and doctorate there in Eugene, Oregon.
Nice. Okay. And then uh those so what was your like career like after your like what kind of tell us about your career?
So, I'm a curious person and I love learning. So my career takes me in different paths. So I have worked a lot in child welfare. I've worked in substance use disorder, worked in research. I've worked a lot with tribes across the United States.
Mm.
And I'm always looking for ways that I can help solve systemic problems. And
Okay.
anytime that I think about, here we have these systemic problems and we need more supports, we need more services, we need more resources, it always comes back to education for me. And that's, I love, Falling for Learning. I love the name of your podcast because
Thank
um,
you.
I was like, yes, this is what we need. We need well educated people to help think through some of the challenges that we're facing in our society today. And we need people who have been strategically marginalized by the systems to have the education they need to help
Yeah.
overcome some of the strategic barriers that have been placed in front of us.
Yeah. So thank you so much. Yeah, it's all about that falling in love with learning, making it a pursuit, a lifelong passion, things that you care about, and also about being able to elevate your community. So all
Mhm.
of those things.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us about you have this school that you founded. How did that come about?
Yeah, so the Pro was born in 2020. So I had tried a lot of different things. I've worked at system level doing teacher prep programs. I've done professional development with teachers and all of these kind of things. And teachers have come back and they say, Dr. Harwick, we're mad at you. And I said, what? What did I do?
What?
And they said, well, we've tried some of these things that you've talked about in our schools, and our admin said we can't do it. And I
Mm,
said, okay, tell me
yes.
more, right? And so here we've got this structure again. And, again, I'm a research scientist. I have a PhD in education. And so, what we're learning about is um, evidence-based practices. And, so what my teaching is about is how to deliver evidence-based practices in school settings. Well,
Yes.
there's barriers saying you can't do that. You can't do that. We also know
Right.
that there's a gap between research and practice of about 13 to 15 years, right?
Ah,
Yeah.
yes.
So, long story short, I was teaching at an in-person school as the pandemic hit. My kiddo was going there as well, and I wasn't trying to say too much about the experience I was having in the school because we weren't using best practices. Pedagogy was behind the times because I seemed like my kid was having a pretty good experience. But then when we went into lockdown, he said, "I'm done. I'm going back to homeschooling. I'm not doing this anymore." And
Right.
so he doesn't remember this because he was 16, early in the morning for him, and he was making a quesadilla, and I started ranting about the school because I was still working there. I was determined to finish the year, even though we were online. And
Mhm.
he's like, "Oh, you should just start your own school." I was like, what did you say?
From the mouths of babes, right?
From the
From the
mouth of babes.
mouths of
He
babes.
doesn't remember because he was like early in the morning and 16, and so I pitched it online and said, I'm thinking about starting a remote democratic school. And within 24 hours, I had 100. Do it, do it, do it. And so that was April 16th of 2020. We launched in the fall of 2020.
Okay, so who did you send this out to?
Just on Facebook. It was just like one of those Facebook posts. And, I carefully craft Facebook posts, which I think are going to be so insightful and crickets. But this was just like a flip it, like, I'm going to start this school. And everybody's like, do it, do it, do it. And so I did.
Love that. Okay. Wow. So tell me about this name.
Okay. So there's a couple reasons for the name. One, as a child, I loved pearls. I loved that you had to go through the muck to get them, and
Okay.
and that it was hard to find them. And I was always really attracted to them. And I was never attracted to like diamonds or anything like that, but pearls were always really special to me. I also had the honor and privilege of studying with Dr. Art Pearl at the University of Oregon, and he and his partner, research partner, wrote the Democratic Classroom Theory to Inform Practice. So
Okay.
literally the book, when I was in grad school and I was so upset about like things I was seeing in the education system, everybody said, you need to go talk to Dr. Pearl. He was probably 85 or 86 at that time and had been retired for years. So they said, you're going to love him because he can say whatever he wants. He's been retired forever.
Right. Like, what are you gonna do?
What are they going to do? So I met with him. We bonded immediately. I started reading the book, which was written in 1999. And there was this roadmap of how we could do education better. And I was like, we don't need another study, another intervention. Like, it's right here. Somebody just needs to do this.
The Rewrite Method and the Rewrite Method Workbook are your go-to resource for helping kids to learn to fall in love with writing. It has the tips, tools, resources, strategies, and skill building activities to help kids fall out of writing hate and into loving to write. Get your book set today. This episode is going to include Tiffany's tips. She is a homeschooling mom. She's been on our show before, and she's going to give us some tips about what she does. She's a mom of 3, and we're going to get some tips from her on how to get our children the competitive advantage. What have you been thinking about?
One thing that comes to mind is this book that is called 30 Million Words, Building a Child's Brain. So this
Oh,
book
that's
goes
good.
it goes into how much words help the brain development. And it talks about how when you start from before they can even talk, when they're just babies babbling, how babies babble. And I often see people going, "Oh, really? What happened, baby?" Engaging
Yeah.
with the baby's babbles and maybe copying what they're doing. If they're going ba 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 ba, you go ba 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 ba, to that's also communicating and helping develop their brain. And it just talks about how the more words they know, the more that they'll have, like you said, that competitive advantage, and the more their brains will develop and help them as they grow up. And
Yeah.
I liked how they kind of broke down this point of how to go about doing this. And they called it tune in, talk more, and take turns. So
Okay.
the tune in aspect is, let's say you have a child that's like building blocks, right? And you notice that it's getting tall, and you just go over and you kind of notice what they're doing and seem excited about it and interested.
Yeah.
Like, oh wow, I see you have red and green and blue. Wow, this is really tall. How tall is it going to be? Just kind of tuning in and observing what they're doing. The talk more aspect of it is about how you can just respond to them when let's say you want them to do something, like put your shoes on.
Yeah.
Instead of just barking orders, get your shoes on, we got to go. Maybe saying, hey, we need to get our shoes on so that our feet aren't cold when we go outside, or so that our toes don't get wet because it's raining out. So we got to get our shoes on. So you're going to put one foot in and another foot in. You have 2 feet, engaging in conversation,
Okay.
narrating what's going on. I love to take my son, who's 3, to the grocery store. And we have a ball because I'm in there talking about everything that we see, everything that I pick up. We're going over colors, we're going over numbers, we're noticing the letters in the store. It's a whole learning experience. But we're just shopping for groceries.
And that really highlights like one of the things, like this book is called 30 Million Words. And for
Mhm.
those of you who don't know out there, that many kids come to school behind, right? And this show is all about giving kids the competitive advantage. And the way to not have them behind is actually talking, having that vocabulary. And so what Tiffany is saying is the opposite of barking orders. Put your shoes on, sit down, be quiet. Instead, having conversations and talking more and more about why we're doing things, what we see, how to do things. And that really helps grow the child's vocabulary, because when we only bark orders at kids, really don't engage with them in conversation, they have limited vocabulary and limited understanding about why they're doing
Going on,
things.
yeah.
And so that 30 million word I believe that's a 30 million word gap or something, right? Or
Mhm.
yeah, that people the
Exactly.
kids have because you've just said sit down, be quiet, stop, don't. Instead of like she's saying, we need to put our shoes on because we our feet might get dirty, our feet might get hurt if we don't have any shoes on. It's time for us to go, and this is how we get ready. We put three things on. We put on shoes, we put on our coat, we put on our hat or something, and it keeps our ears warm and our head warm. And all of those words is like, oh, that's a lot of talking, but that's what our kids need to have
Exactly.
that competitive advantage. Rather than the opposite side of that is a disadvantage with not understanding, not having the words, not having the reasoning.
Yes. And I do want to add that the book is called 30 Million Words Building a Child's Brain by Dr. Dana Suskin.
Art was very dedicated to public schools. And so when I decided I wanted to do this and I wanted to call it the Pearl, I reached out to his family and said, because he had passed a few years before, and I said, I have this idea. I know your dad wouldn't be thrilled if it wasn't in public school, but I think this is the time to do this
Yeah.
differently. And we'll become a nonprofit and have sliding scale so that we can make sure that we live
Right.
in the spirit of Dr. Pearl. And his daughter said, "I'm in. What do we need to do?" And then his granddaughter was one of our first students as
Oh
well.
my goodness.
Yeah.
That is amazing. I just want to say, like, one thing that is a big issue with education is a lot of people have opinions about it and affect policy. There's researchers that may not have been classroom teachers, may not have worked at a school, but they may have their doctoral degree in education. But
Yes.
there are people who make policies, laws, and everything, and you know put it in on a school, right? But they don't really have information from classroom practitioners, right? Maybe they talk to a researcher or something. So there's this huge gap, like you said, between research, policy, and actually the practice that's going on in schools. And that is a huge issue. And I make it akin to, like, if it doesn't matter the designer. If I come and design your house, you could be a world renowned designer. If I never talk to you about your house, how you use it, the functionality, how you use your space, what you would you like to use your space, you can have this great design, but it just doesn't work for you,
Mhm.
right? Because you didn't tell me that, oh, I like this space for reading and I need a space here to do yoga and I need to do, so somebody else, like, they may need a workout room that has weights in it, or it's just different ways that people use space, and that's practical for your family. And the same thing with teaching. They're coming in designing our classrooms or our policies, and they don't even know what we need. And then it's so different depending on the class for that year, right? Because the last
Right.
year's class could be
Yes.
totally different.
Yes.
Same subject, same age, but different group of kids need something a little different. um and you know even then, different classes, different school settings, different cultures. There's just so many things that really are specific that
Mhm.
policies don't always fit to. And again, they're not even talking to any teacher, a lot of them, let alone like a specific teacher, so I'm glad that there's someone out there that's actually putting those boots on the ground and putting that research into practice. So thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
doing that.
Yeah, and, to your point, I also teach, at the school because I
Wow.
never wanted to be one of those academics or admins that you're like, "When was the last time you talked to a kid?" You know?
1982.
Right,
But I've
1982.
got my PhD.
Right. And, I mean, the language, the slang, the music, all of those kind of things, so
Yes,
different. So
right.
you can hear it in admins and professors that haven't been around kids because the stories they tell are not relevant for today's youth, right?
Mm-mm,
And so,
not
like,
at
I
all.
have to learn about what video games they're into and all of these kind of things. But the other thing for my teachers, when they say, "Well, I don't know if we can," I say, "Well, you can." because I'm in the classroom, right? And I'm doing this, and would you like to hear different ways that I incorporate differentiated instruction? So, differentiated instruction is mandatory for every single kid. So, for parents that aren't aware of that kind of language, that
Yeah.
means that we have classes capped at 10 students, and teachers need to change the way that they're giving instruction to make sure that every kiddo in that classroom gets the information they need to be successful.
Say that again. 10 kids? That's amazing. I love
And
that.
we're online, and so 10 is kind of the magic number. And I've taught graduate students at 12, 15, and I really like 10 because nobody can fade away.
Mm.
And so for the shy kids, I say, there's only 8 of you in the class today. And when you were in the class of 30, I know
Yeah.
that you could fade to the back and nobody noticed you. But if you're not talking, there's 8 of you. I can notice that you're not talking with us today.
Yeah. That's amazing. Okay, can you tell us about the makeup of like your demographics that are in your school?
Yeah.
What is the what type of demographics do you
Yeah.
have in your school?
So about over 60% of our students identify as BIPOC. About 65% of our students identify as neurodivergent. That's the category that they prefer. It can look like autism, ADHD, learning disabilities. So that's kind of their blanket. They chose, and this is part of what we do, is we co-create with them. We co-created the demographics form with them, and neurodivergent is what they prefer. um, so many of our students who have come to us have been bullied in and had experienced microaggressions in public school settings, and some in
Mm,
private school settings as well. As your listeners may know, oftentimes the demographics of the teachers don't match the demographics of the students. And so our students come to us, and many of them have really shut down and they've lost that love of learning. And when they come
yeah.
into our school, I say to them, to our teachers, I was like, slow, 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 gentle, gentle, gentle. And I tell the parents, you're not going to see a flurry of activity right away with, some of the kiddos, because we have to build our trust and our relationship with them. And,
Mm,
I tell the teachers too, they're not going to trust you, and they shouldn't, because they have learned in other systems that they can't trust that
I
teacher.
see.
And so we build that relationship first. Then we dig in. But a key piece of what we do is reigniting that spark, helping them find out what do they love. And many kids who have been in kind of mainstream settings, when I say like, so part of what you get to do at the Pearl is you get to study stuff that you're into. What are you into? And they say, what do you mean? What do you mean? I don't.
That's amazing.
Yeah, they say, I don't know. I don't know what I'm into. Like, nobody's ever asked me that before.
No,
Um,
yeah.
we have a lot of, again, from it aligns with the data, 10th graders, right? 10th graders who come to us and they say, I'm done. I'm just done with school.
Yeah.
Um, so they come to us and I'm like, but what do you want to learn? And they're like, I have no idea, because I've tried and my day was so full and I was just trying to check off boxes and do
Yeah.
what needed to be done. So I don't know what I like. And so we help them explore and find what they're passionate about. And this is like early career exploration without being explicitly telling them, we're
Yes.
going to let you think about your career. We're not even there yet. We're just like, what do you like? What do you enjoy? What are you interested in? And they get to try different things out. And then our job as a teacher, and this is the democratic part, if I know a kiddo's really into music, but really afraid of math, then the math teacher's role is like, well, how do I incorporate music into it?
Yes.
How do we create
Absolutely.
that interest to get them excited? And in my classes, like we're doing geography, and we're doing geography through the lens of music. So we're going to be looking at migration patterns and how music changes when groups of people, come together. And so that'll be our kind of lens as we move through the Americas in the fall.
Oh, you said fall 2020 is when you started.
Yes.
Okay. And it's a high school, correct? So
It's a
9
high
through 12?
school, but we have to change our name because we do offer educational choices to middle schoolers as well.
Right.
So I have had 3 now middle schoolers that have come to me, set up a meeting to meet me by Zoom, and say, "I don't want to wait. I want to be in your school now." And if a 13-year-old is willing to meet with a stranger and say, I need to be in your school now, I said, well, let's try it. It
Yeah.
works beautifully because middle school, as you know, as an educator, is such a pivotal moment. And that's when the tension. So if the family was homeschooling and
Yeah.
it was a beautiful relationship, and now all of a sudden they're fighting, and mom is like, but they love doing this with me. And it's natural part of their development. And so it's really helpful to partner with other programs so that you maintain your relationship and you're not fighting about algebra, right? Because that's not what you
Yeah.
want your parenting experience to be. So we,
Absolutely. I think it's notable that you brought that up because yes, that's also why Falling for Learning is here because there are changes that our kids go through. Like everything's great in second grade, third grade, or whatever. They might be great in high school, but I mean middle school, but whatever. Like and it may take partners. It may take like just knowing certain strategies or different things. It depends on your kid what they need, but being aware that that is normal, that they're going to go through changes, and what they thought was wonderful before they may not even care about, or maybe embarrassed that you brought it up now.
yeah, yeah. And so, we are a partnership and we work with kiddos and with families to help them navigate this very difficult time in development. And, for some of our students with ADHD, they really want to do it on their own. They don't want their
Yeah.
parents involved in their schooling anymore. And so we say, oh, let's try it out. I can show you some different tools that may work for you. Are you willing to try these? Do you want to try it your own way? And then we help them learn how to advocate. And sometimes, depending on kind of what's going on with them and where they are and learning about themselves and how their brain works, sometimes they go, you know what, it would be really helpful if my mom reminds me. I said, okay, would you like me to contact her or would you like to talk with her yourself? And it really depends. It can go both ways. But
Mm.
now it's not a power dynamic between the kiddo and the parent. Now it's the kiddo saying, you know what? I think I've identified some help that I need. And I
Yeah.
would like to ask my mom. And moms are so excited. They're like, oh, I get to check Google Classroom and help them, right? And we give a little coaching of like how could that look so that it doesn't feel like, you're all in my business. It's more about, I'm here to support you and remember this is something that you identified that you could use for now. And then when you don't need it anymore, I can fade away.
Yes, that's such a tough balance for some parents because I think sometimes that hands-off approach, the kids may not do any work, or I've heard of some that they didn't realize they were doing no work. And then of course you don't want to do too much because you want them to gain the independence. And so you're trying to find that happy medium. So that's great.
Yeah. So, we find that our kids learn to be better self advocates. They learn what they need. They feel safe to be their beautiful, authentic selves. And then
Yes.
parents share with us that, things are just better at home now too, when we're not constantly fighting about school, constantly fighting to get them up, constantly fighting to get them to school, constantly fighting about the homework and fighting and fighting and fighting. And, I always remind parents like all of that is communication, and kiddos don't often have all the words to describe what's going on with school and and what's happening there and how they're feeling about it. And so, you ask, well, how was it today? It was fine. But the behavior saying it's not fine because they're not succeeding and they're not doing their homework and you can't get them out the door and all of these things. So you
I
have to look
see.
at that behavior, like what is the need that that child is communicating with their behavior. And this is something that we bring into the classroom too. We want to make sure that the kiddos learning needs are met so they don't get frustrated, they don't struggle. And also for those people that are really sailing and they're so accelerated that they're still getting those challenges to help prepare them for college as well so that they know how to navigate when they're given an educational challenge.
Okay. So, can you tell me, like, you take people from around the country, around the United States, other
Yeah,
countries as
we
well?
do. And it changes. So I love when you were talking about the cohorts because each cohort kind of has this personality. We had one cohort, most of them have gone on and graduated and are doing other things. But at one time we had students from 7 countries. And that was
Wow.
really fantastic because it was truly a multicultural experience for all of our kiddos.
Yeah.
Um, we do accept students from all over the United States. We kind of focus on the Americas because it just works better with the time zone. Um,
Okay.
through the school choice programs, we can receive direct funding from the state of Utah, Arizona, West Virginia, and New Hampshire. So
Okay.
if you have listeners in those states, the state will help cover tuition. Like I said, we do have limited sliding scale scholarships for those kiddos who really say, like, this is where I need to be. We want to not turn, teens away that say we're the right school for them. So we always try to make it work. Um, yeah. And, we welcome 6th through 12th grade.
So let's say I have a child that wants to attend your school or is interested because we're not sure. Like, how would I, like, with a in-person school, I could do a school tour. Like, how would a parent navigate being a joining part of your school or just even checking it out to see if it's a viable option, maybe?
Yeah. So parents go to our website, it's thepearlhighschool.org. There is a button on there that says meet with the director. That's me. And so you can schedule an appointment directly on my calendar and we can talk. I love it when the interested student comes to that meeting. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's the parents kind of check me out first, talk about the school,
Hmm.
and see whether or not it seems like a good match. And then the student will meet with me. The student's always welcome to meet with me independently
Right.
or with the family, whatever they want. I say I work with teens all day, and so I'm totally fine with the students grilling me and asking me tons of questions and being suspicious and not,
Yeah.
like, this sounds too good to be true. Is this for real? Um, so yeah, so then we work to see whether or not it seems like it's a good fit, and then the students enroll if they choose to be with us. We also sometimes students want to talk to another student, and so we can arrange that. If they want to meet a couple of the other teachers, if there's one particular class that they say, well, I'm
Okay.
looking at this school because it's the only school that I can find that has Japanese, and they want to meet the
Right.
Japanese teacher, they can meet the teacher as well.
That's amazing. So we are, I'm definitely all that's in the show notes. Please, get in contact with Dr. Robin Harwick. Um, and tell us the name of the school again, the whole name.
Yeah, it's the Pearl Remote Democratic High School.
Okay. And so give us your contact information. So how are they getting in contact with
Yeah,
you? Yeah.
you can send me an email at Dr. Harwick at thepearlhighschool.org.
Okay. And is there anything that you can tell the audience, like any last kind of things, tips for them as they're navigating the schooling for their child?
I think one of the most important things is, and this is so hard if you have multiple children or you're busy with work and everything, but especially for tweens and teens, when they want to talk to you, you need to just drop everything and listen. And
Mm,
oftentimes for teenagers, and like I said, I was a foster parent before. It was always like at 10:30 after I've brushed my teeth and I already have my pajamas on. Mom, it's really, really important because that's the time where they're saying, like, I feel open right now.
right.
And especially if you're having a difficult time getting your child to talk, you have to listen to when they're ready. And you also have to listen to them talk about things that might not be super interesting to you, but they're really interesting to them. And those are
Yes.
those things where you're saying, like, I'm here and I'm present and I'm here for you. And that's the way that we demonstrate that to tweens and teens. And, just by being there when they're ready. And then when you have these other challenges that you need to talk about, like, tell me about. And so asking those questions, tell me about what's going on in math right now, instead of, you know, I noticed that you have a F in math and you haven't turned anything in, right? Like, so if you
Yeah.
kind of like, tell me about what's going on, and listen to see what's going, you know, their perception is their reality.
Mm,
Even if the teacher's saying one thing and saying, that's not true, that's not happening, that's the way it feels to the
I
child,
see. I
right?
see.
And that's really important because that's their experience. It feels like that teacher's bullying me. It feels like I'm being pushed to the side. It feels like I'm stupid. right? So those are
Okay.
all feeling real. And so the more that we can say like, okay, I hear you. How can we work through this together and build that collaboration?
That's such a great, like such sage advice, right? Like, because it is easy to say, like, no, the teacher's not bullying you. You actually didn't do this, didn't do that,
Yeah.
but just accepting, like listening, like I'm listening to you and knowing like that's their perception. And
Mhm.
we know that our teenagers could have skewed perception, but we don't have to point that out. Just helping to help them work through it and think through it. Um, I think that's so great. So thanks again for joining us, Dr. Robin Harwick. And all the information is in the show notes. And for our audience and our listeners and our viewers out there, do something today that's going to give your child the competitive advantage. Have a great week. Thanks
Take care.
again.
Thank you.
Thanks again for supporting the Falling for Learning podcast. New episodes go live every Saturday at 5 p.m. You can watch us on youtube.com at Falling for Learning or listen on all major podcast platforms such as Apple, Google, Audible, Spotify, and much more. For more resources, visit fallinginlovewithlearning.com. We really appreciate you. Have a wonderful week.